13 years, this strip of sand and asphalt was his kingdom. Ocean Parkway, a place where decent people don't stop, and lost souls are never found. This thin line between the bay and the Atlantic, this was the graveyard, the home of the monster we called LISK, the Long Island serial killer. He was a ghost story, a regional folk tale whispered by fishermen and feared by families. We pictured a drifter, a phantom trucker, some unknowable force of nature. We were wrong. The monster wasn't a phantom. The monster was a commuter. He had a mortgage. He had a family. He worried about property taxes. And he took the Long Island Railroad into Midtown Manhattan every damn day. Before we get to the pizza crusts and the burner phones, and trust me, the tech that caught this guy is the only reason I sleep at night, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to understand the myth that held Long Island captive for more than a decade. One body is a tragedy, but when they keep looking, it becomes a statistic. This discovery sends a shockwave of absolute terror through the community. This isn't random. This is practiced. This is a method. The burlap, it's a signature. It's not just a way to transport the bodies. It's a uniform, a ritual. Until 2022, when a new task force was formed. They didn't have new leads. They didn't have new witnesses. They had something better. They had 12 years of old data and brand new technology. They decided to hunt the digital ghost that the killer left behind. When you hunt a monster who's been dormant or just unrecognized for a decade, you don't start with a face. You start with the echoes. The killer, whoever he was, wasn't just meticulous in his violence. He was meticulous in his communication. This is where the mask starts to form. We now know the killer used burner phones. Not one burner phone, that's for amateurs. He allegedly used different burner phones to contact each victim. Let's talk arrogance first. This guy. After he murdered Melissa Barthelemy, he didn't just toss the phone, he held on to it. And over the next month, he used her phone to call her teenage sister. But in that arrogance, he worked in the city. He lived in the suburbs. The task force now has a geographical profile. They need someone who lives in or frequents Massapequa Park and commutes regularly to Midtown Manhattan. This narrows it down from everyone to thousands. Still a needle in a haystack, but now they know what the needle looks like. They need a physical link. They need to connect the digital ghost to a flesh and blood man. And that link comes from Amber Costello. See, unlike the others, Amber's killer didn't just pick her up. He'd allegedly seen her several times. He was a client, and Amber had a friend who remembered the client, remembered the interaction. Why? Because the client was a terrifying creep, 6'4", a real-life Frankenstein, and he drove a specific vehicle, a dark first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche. It's 2022. The cops take that new geographical profile, Midtown and Massapequa, and they cross-reference it with every registered owner of a first-gen Chevy Avalanche in that area. And one name pops up. Rex Heuermann. He lives in Massapequa Park. He owns a Chevy Avalanche. And he runs an architecture firm on 5th Avenue in Manhattan. Pause. They had him. They just didn't have him. They had the truck. They had the locations. They had the height. It was all theory. They had the mask. But they needed the man underneath. And to get the man, they needed his DNA. This is where the killer's meticulous planning finally crashes into his own human arrogance. The burlap sacks the Gilgo 4 were found in. They weren't sterile. The killer, in his haste or his excitement or his rage, left pieces of himself behind, specifically hairs. On the burlap around Megan Waterman, investigators found a single male hair. On the tape binding Amber Costello, they found another. The challenge? In 2010, the DNA technology wasn't good enough to get a full profile from a rootless hair follicle. All they knew was that the hairs belonged to the same male family line, through mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA. But now, it's 2023. Technology has caught up. They can test those hairs for nuclear DNA, the specific genetic fingerprint that belongs to only one person. They have the suspect, Rex Heuermann. They have the mystery, DNA from the crime scenes. They just have to connect them. But you can't just walk up to a man you suspect is the most prolific serial killer in New York history and ask him to swab his cheek. He'll lawyer up. He'll vanish. So, the surveillance begins. They tail him. They live in his shadow, waiting for him to make one simple human mistake. They wait for him to be lazy. January 2023. He's outside his office in Manhattan. He buys lunch. He eats. He takes his garbage, including a pizza box with the leftover crusts, and he throws it into a public trash can. The surveillance team moves in. They retrieve the pizza box. They swab the crust. They run the nuclear DNA from that pizza crust against the single male hair found on the burlap sack wrapped around Megan Waterman. It's a match. The ghost had a name. The whispers had a face. The Frankenstein monster in the Chevy Avalanche, the commuter from Massapequa, the architect from Midtown, was Rex Heuermann. They weren't done. They needed more. Cops have to assume the defense lawyer is going to argue someone else ate his pizza. Contamination. They needed to tie him to the other hairs, the ones found on Amber Costello, which were only good for that mitochondrial DNA, the profile passed down by the mother. They needed the female DNA from his family line. So they kept watching the house in Massapequa. They wait for the trash, and they hit the jackpot. They retrieve an energy drink bottle discarded by Heuermann's wife. They test her DNA from the bottle. Her mitochondrial DNA is a match for the mtDNA profile recovered from those hairs found on Amber Costello. Let me break that down because it's chillingly brilliant. The DNA from his wife proved she wasn't the source of the hair. It proved the hair wasn't hers. But because mtDNA is passed from mother to child, it proved that the mystery hair had to have come from her offspring, or a male in her family line who shared that DNA. Combined with the pizza crust DNA, the net wasn't just closing, it was locked. Rex Heuermann, this architect, this family man, was allegedly carrying his family's DNA inside his truck, transferring it onto the tape and the burlap he used to wrap the women he killed, and dumping them on the beach. July 13th, 2023. Rex Heuermann leaves his office in Manhattan. He's walking down the street, probably thinking about blueprints or train schedules, or maybe just the hunt. The task force, which has been living in his shadow for a year, steps out. The ghost is put in handcuffs. When they took him, they didn't just arrest a man, they opened a Pandora's box that had been nailed shut for 13 years. And what was inside his house? That's where the folklore ends and the filthy, terrifying reality of criminal psychology begins. The house. That house in Massapequa Park. If you haven't seen the footage, look it up. It's the visual definition of something is wrong here. His neighbors had pristine lawns, white picket fences. His house was a wreck. It was the neighborhood haunted house. Overgrown, rotting. It was literally the mask slipping. And the inside, it was a hoarder's den. Piles of junk, boxes to the ceiling. But in the basement, behind a locked door, they found the real Rex Heuermann. They found the arsenal. Over 200 firearms, guns stacked everywhere. This wasn't a collector. This was a man preparing for war, living in his own fortress of paranoia and control. But the guns weren't the scary part. The scary part was the computer. They pulled the hard drives, and they found the killer's real trophy room. This guy wasn't just a killer, he was a student. He was obsessed. He had thousands of searches related to the LISK case. He was studying his own murders. He was watching the investigation, reading the theories, watching the documentaries made about him. He searched for phrases like, "Why hasn't the Long Island serial killer been caught?" This This is the feedback loop of the modern monster. He performs the act, then he relives it by watching us, the public, react to the act. But it gets so much worse. He wasn't just searching for himself. He was searching for the victims, and he was searching for their families. He was looking up the sisters of the women he killed. He was monitoring the children of the victims. He was keeping digital tabs on the people he had traumatized years later, feeding that same psychological hunger that made him taunt Melissa Barthelemy's little sister by phone. And the searches, the violent, disturbing pornography, the search queries mapping out torture, mapping out disposal. He wasn't just doing this, he was planning it step by step, like he was designing a building. And the most important clue of all, the planning software he used to create deleted files, showed that he was meticulously tracking his wife and daughter's travel schedules. This is the psychological key. This isn't the killer who snaps. This isn't the chaotic drifter. This is the ultimate compartmentalizer. Look at the timelines. Melissa Barthelemy vanishes in 2009. His wife is in Iceland. Megan Waterman vanishes in June 2010. His wife is in Atlantic City. Amber Costello vanishes in September 2010. His wife is out of state. He allegedly only hunted when he had the house to himself. This is the man who built his entire life, his marriage, his career, his fatherhood, as an alibi. It was the perfect cover. Who could suspect the family man? The guy arguing about permits in Midtown. He'd drive back from the city, kiss his kids, wait for them to leave, and then the other side would emerge. He would go to his soundproofed basement vault, plan the hunt, use the burner phones, engage the victim, do the unthinkable, and then drive the 15 minutes to Ocean Parkway to discard them in burlap bags, before driving back home to sleep in his own bed, just another tired commuter in Massapequa Park. It's almost impossible to comprehend, isn't it? The sheer depth of the deception. This guy is the definition of the neighbor you know nothing about. It makes you wonder about every quiet house on every normal street. We dive deep into cases, just like this every single week. The psychology of the hidden monster, the folklore that turns out to be real. If you want to understand the darkness that lives right next door, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. It lets the algorithm know you like the lights kept off. Now, back to the mask. The mask is everything. Rex Heuermann isn't just one person. He's a construct. There is Rex the architect. This is the guy obsessed with rules, blueprints, zoning laws, order, control, precision. Then there is Rex the family man, the provider, the dad, the commuter, the ultimate picture of boring suburban stability. And then there is the monster, the one who lives in the digital searches and the basement vault, the one who requires absolute chaos, violence, and the ultimate exertion of power over those he views as disposable. The only way these three identities can coexist is if the killer believes he is smarter than everyone else. And for 13 years, he was. He used his knowledge of the landscape, the desolate, overgrown parkway that nobody patrols, as his personal dumping ground. He used the anonymity of the city, Penn Station, to make his taunting calls. He blended in so perfectly that nobody even looked at him. But here's the joke, a sick, cosmic joke. This meticulous planner, this architect of murder, was brought down by the most mundane things. He was caught by a piece of pizza crust he threw away in the city, and an energy drink his wife threw away in the suburbs. He built an empire of terror, a fortress of secrets, and it was all undone by his own garbage. Now, this case is not closed. Not by a long shot. He's been indicted for the Gilgo 4. He's the prime suspect in other remains found on that beach. But what about the rest of his life? This man traveled. He had properties in Las Vegas. He worked in Atlantic City. Police forces in multiple states are now digging up cold cases, looking for connections to the architect from Long Island. We thought we were hunting a ghost who only haunted one dark road. We might have just caught a monster who haunted the entire country, one business trip at a time. The horror of the Long Island serial killer was never really about the how. We knew how they died. The horror was the who, the fact that he was invisible, that he could hunt, kill, and discard human beings with the efficiency of someone taking out the trash, and then just melt back into society. For 13 years, the burlap sacks on Gilgo Beach were a symbol of an unsolvable mystery, a modern piece of American folklore. But the arrest of Rex Heuermann changed the story. It's a new kind of folklore now. It's the story of the monster next door. It's the realization that the most terrifying things in the world don't come from the shadows. They come from the brightly lit commuter train. They sit right next to you, reading the paper, carrying a briefcase, wearing a mask of absolute, terrifying normalcy. The case against Rex Heuermann is still developing. They're still digging up his yard, and you can bet we will be following every single shovelful of dirt. This is what we do here. We look into the cases that defy explanation, the psychology that terrifies us, and the local legends that turn out to be all too real. If you have a case you want me to dive into, or a theory on this one, leave it in the comments below. I read all of them, especially the weird ones. Stay safe out there, and maybe get to know your neighbors. Or, then again, maybe don't.